Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Williamson. How you doing? At Williamson NFL. Do me a favor, go find my YouTube page. Give me a follow there. Getting close to 1,000 subscribers. That's when YouTube actually starts giving me some bucks. Not a lot, but hey, it'd be nice. We're talking penalties today. It's been nerd fest with Matt lately. I'm digging into some real deep diving stuff. And this comes from Warren Sharp's site, where they broke down the AFC East, and this morning they broke down the AFC North. And I wanted to concentrate on that, how penalties affected these four teams. And it's really in-depth, nerdy, but I also think it's really telling. And really what I came away from is, first off, it's one of the reasons the Steelers win close games and battle things out till the end and come back in the fourth quarter, things like that. They don't hurt themselves a lot. But I also came away going, and it's a common response when I do AFC North studies is, man, this division's really good. That the Bengals and Ravens have elite quarterbacks. I think the Steelers and Ravens have elite coaches. The Browns coach has won Coach of the Year twice now in a short stretch. The Browns and Ravens, I don't know if you know this, are considered two of the most, by far, analytically inclined teams in the league. And it's just good football, and it's hard to compete. And I'm going to read a lot of this stuff to you. When I talk penalties with these four teams, it's almost all positive. Like a lot of teams you look at like, man, penalties destroyed these teams. This division is all very similar. So digging in with the Steelers, this is the good. So there's a handful of bullet points good, a couple bullet points bad. The good, they were 27th in penalties per game. Meaning if you're 32nd, you're best, so you're near the best in terms of penalties per game. A below average 39% of the Steelers' penalties were committed by the offense. Limited penalties are essential for a risk-adverse team like the Steelers to function at a competent level. Couldn't agree more. I would expect things to open up a little with a different quarterback going forward, maybe be less risk-adverse. I think that's probably in the cards, and in turn, maybe throw some more touchdown passes. The Steelers ranked 30th in pre-snap penalties per game, with those infractions accounting for just 30.5% of the team's overall penalties. It might shock some of you. You guys think that, boy, it's such an undisciplined team. Chooks Corafor is jumping off sides. 30th in pre-snap penalties. The offensive line was speaking of Chooks, who's gone. The offensive line was responsible for only 18% of the team's overall penalties. That's very low. You would think offensive lines and secondaries are where you get penalized the most. And Steelers O-line, very few penalties. That's important. Give the offensive line coach a little pat on the back for that too. And here's an interesting one that's very true for the whole division. The Steelers were a top 10 defense at generating pre-snap infractions on opposing offenses. So a lot of the stuff they do makes you jump off sides, things of that nature. So that's actually a big trend within the division. Here's some bad from last year. The wide receivers and tight ends were responsible for an above average percentage of offensive penalties. This could be due to the offensive scheme. It's worth noting that new offensive coordinator Arthur Smith's teams committed noticeably fewer penalties at these positions, wide receivers and tight ends. Good to know. Maybe get better in that regard. A disproportionately high 20% of the Steelers' overall penalties were via discipline-related infractions, such as face mask and unsportsmanlike conducts. They're an aggressive team. That's also a trend within the division too, folks. The defensive backs were responsible for 32% of the team's penalties and 34% of total penalty yardage. I think that's somewhat of a reflection on Porter and something he has to get better at. And above average 30% of the Steelers' penalties occurred on third down plays, with a 50% split on these penalties between offense and defense. Obviously, you don't want a crucial penalty on third down as opposed to first down or whatever. So that's an important aspect of this as well. So other teams, well, we'll get to them in a minute here. So BetOnline is your number one source for your summer sports this season for Major League Baseball, golf, and so many more. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So a lot of Steelers stuff there that really added up to me, but a lot of this also adds up to the other teams, namely the Ravens, who I know it seems like ancient history, but I think they were the best team in the regular season last year. So they were a top 5 defense in surrendering automatic first downs via penalties. Like, for example, X call happened and automatic first down. Well, they were one of the best teams in the league at not giving up automatic first downs. But they're always an above average penalized defense. So actually, I stand corrected. They were very high in that. And this hands-on approach is how they talk about been very effective for the Ravens. Yes, they take a lot of penalties on defense, but they make it work. And I'll explain that a little bit better for them. To no surprise, the defense excelled at generating offensive holding and false starts calls. They ranked top 5 in both categories. A lot of it is because they're so aggressive on defense. They do have some automatic first downs that they allow, but they also are really good at generating penalties on opposing offenses. They were second in the league in that as well. So 5 AFC North teams, Ravens, Browns, and Steelers defense, were all top 5 in generating offensive penalties from the opponent. You see what I mean? Like, this blitz is coming and I jump, things like that. The defense averaged the fewest pre-snap penalties per game, accounting for just 8.5% of the team's pre-snap infractions. That's well below league average of 22%. A below average 31% of the Ravens' penalties were pre-snap, with the vast majority committed by the offensive via false start and delay of games. Only 18% of the Ravens' penalties occurred on third downs. That's crucial. One of the lowest percentages in the NFL. Conversely, the offense generated 32 of their beneficial penalties on key third down plays. So the defense for Baltimore didn't have key third down penalties. The offense benefited from a great deal from the opponent taking third down penalties. And there was one bad note for him. The Ravens were co-leaders for roughing the passer and led the NFL in face mask penalties. They also ranked in the top 10 for unnecessary roughness. These 3 infractions accounted for 26% of their total penalty yardage. Aggressive stuff. Again, this is a AFC North trend. The above average penalties on defense is standard operating procedure for the Ravens. They're top of the league every year this way. It's a proven strategy, and the reality is Baltimore's defense gets away with far more holding calls than they're ever penalized for. If you do it a lot, you're not going to get called as much in the secondary. Defensive holding. All right, let's move the Browns here and the Bengals. Brownies. Defense ranked number 1 in generating pre-snap infractions. Their league-leading percent of penalties on Browns' opponents were assessed via false starts, people jumping when Myles Garrett or blitzes are coming, you know what I mean? The false start numbers contributed to the defense ranking 3rd in generating overall total penalties on opposing offenses. The Browns were one of 2 teams not to commit a roughing the passer penalty. I bet we could probably find 1 or 2, but anyway. The Browns ranked 19th in surrendering automatic first downs via penalties. The offense was one of the least penalized for pre-snap penalties, a feat all the more impressive considering the constant shuffle at quarterback. Makes sense. Shuffling quarterbacks a lot, you should have a lot of pre-snap penalties. They did not. And a well below average of their penalty yards were committed by the offense in Cleveland. The bad. They were second in pre-snap penalties per game on their defense, well above league average. This is not necessarily bad, but it creates penalties on opponents throughout 2022. Again, it's an aggressive thing like Baltimore and Pittsburgh. Maybe you have a few of your own pre-snap penalties. Maybe you're a little aggressive, but it also causes the offense to take more penalties too. The defense ranked at the near or top of defensive offsides, neutral zones infractions, encroachment, and defensive 2-man-to-man on the field. These are the bad, remember. Those 4 groups accounted for 30% of the Browns' total penalties. Due to some of these penalties, opposing offenses flinched more often, losing 5 yards of field position. That in turn tilted the line of scrimmage to the advantage. Again, some of this plays into one another. They were 4th in declined penalties per game. These don't register in the box score only because a more egregious outcome happened. While it's not ideal to lead the league in defensive pre-snap infractions, those Browns penalties clearly presented a major issue for opposing offenses, much like the Ravens, much like the Steelers. From a penalty perspective, it's the ultimate cat and mouse game in the trenches and does merit watching going forward. Is this going to be more of a trend with Cleveland as it has with Baltimore? What's interesting is the similarities between Buffalo and Cleveland in pre-snap penalties, as both finished the season as top-tier units at creative negative situations via false starts on the opponent. We'll see. We don't have to dig into Buffalo all that much. Couple little things here on the Bengals. They're the least trendy. These first three teams, a little more physical, do things a little bit more the same. The Bengals, here's the good. They ranked 31st in penalties per game average and averaged the fewest yards surrendered per game in the NFL last year. And that's something that the Zach Taylor Burrow era has really been a kind of a calling card for the Bengals, which I didn't know before this. I mean, they are very low during that era in penalties. They're 31st for offensive holding. Only the Eagles were better. The Bengals averaged the fewest offensive penalty yards per game last year. The Bengals offense was mid-tier unit generating penalties via passing plays. It did fade down the stretch, though, a big way after Joe Burrow's final injury. But before his injury, this was a top 5 beneficiary of penalties via passing plays. The defense surrendered a below-average amount of automatic first downs via penalties. More importantly, 80% of these penalties occurred on less punitive first and second down plays. So they were really good about the third down stuff. Bad, an above average 28% of Bengals penalties occurred on third downs. The Bengals ranked second for delay of game infractions. It was one category this struggled in last season. But all in all, I hadn't really known this. The Bengals are high quality in the penalty department. Steelers were as well. Baltimore's kind of, and Cleveland were both kind of a lot due to aggression, good and bad, which is a nice way to live, to be honest with you. Steelers have a lot of those qualities as well. I don't know, nerding out here. Thought that was fun. Take care. Over and out.